Is Nebraska in better shape than even we knew as the revenue sharing era is set to begin in college sports? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase.
All right, welcome in. It is Wednesday. Connor Happer here from 1620 The Zone and Mitch Sherman from The Athletic, still sifting our way through a few of the big headliners for Matt Rhule's press conference on Saturday. We knew, Mitch, that this would have enough juice to last us throughout the entire week, and I
the month.
We nailed it.
It might get us through the whole month.
Maybe
we're going to be talking. Well, we're probably going to have to because, well, there'll be interesting content. But Matt Rhule said so much in those 30 minutes, a little more than 30 minutes, that I know from my perspective of having to come up with topics to write about Nebraska football that I have a list that I'll be working through probably into March of just topics that were generated from. It might have just been one comment that he made, but it sparked an interesting idea. And one of them is this topic of revenue sharing and where Nebraska's at financially right now.
Yeah, let's focus in on that a little bit because I mean it's long been a question. Matt Rhule's often talked about it when he's asked, like, hey, how do you feel about the way you're positioned from an NIL perspective? And he always says, I feel pretty good. You never know what that means comparatively to others around the country. And oftentimes when you're talking about NIL, you're talking about bidding wars on individual players. So it's really circumstantial. But Nebraska had a lot of those this offseason when they dove into the transfer portal. And so you get you get the sense that they feel like they're in a pretty good position as far as that's concerned. Now we're going to be heading into the revenue sharing era in college football, where not all the schools are going to be in as good of a shape as Nebraska, where they're going to fund the entire $20.5 or $22 million to spread across their athletic departments, whatever that might be, or B, fund the full, like whatever it is, Nebraska is going to max out on it, it feels like. So I thought it was interesting to hear Matt Rhule talk about how that plays competitively with some of his peers, either in the Big Ten or nationally. Here he is on Saturday.
They're writing $14 million checks, of which they got about half right now, and they're trying to figure out a way to get to the money. The great thing about a young person, if they come to Nebraska, is like we don't take money from the students. Like this is all through our budget, and so it's sustainable. A lot of other schools, rev share is not going to be sustainable, so they can float a big number now and disappoint a kid later. We feel like we can just stand on business. Like, hey, this is what we said, and this is what we're going to do. In terms of for 1890, I'm kind of there as called. Like, when they have an event, I go. If they want me to talk to somebody, I do. I think it's really important that people hear some of the stories. I mean, you guys walk through the parking lot, you don't see like Lamborghinis and Ferraris out there. Like our guys aren't, our guys are investing in their futures and very often taking care of people back home. And but that's probably the extent of it. Really, I mean, Troy's kind of a leader, I think, in college athletics in that realm. So he does a lot of it.
Yeah, you'd notice the Lamborghini outside of the Hawks Championship Center. I have not seen any. He's right. That is different than if you go to Georgia. I'll just leave it at Georgia because Georgia deserves to get all of the bad attention when it comes to Lamborghinis and Ferraris and whatever else it might be that their players are driving 200 miles an hour around Georgia. Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I'm sure Nebraska has some guys who would like to get a Lamborghini and now can afford, if not a Lamborghini, another $200,000 vehicle. It could just, there's not a lot of dealers in Lincoln that can deliver that car, but there's ways to make it happen, and yet you don't see it.
Yeah. So I mean, the crux of that, the big part of that was, Rhule talking about some of the others that are basically writing checks that they're not going to be able to cash. He says revenue sharing might not be sustainable, meaning they might be prepared to pay the $20+ million this year to their student athletes, but then they have to go through the entire process of scrounging together that $20 million next year and next year and next year and next year. And Nebraska, they have it written into their budget already. They're funding it. I mean, they still have to work hard to get the money and everything, but they're going to have it.
Yeah. Like, it's not a guarantee. Nebraska has to win in order to continue to generate the revenue. Like, the revenue isn't already there for 2027 and 2028. Like, they have to sell the tickets. They have to sell the concessions and the merchandise and do all of the things that Nebraska has done historically to make it successful and to put it in a great position where it doesn't have to rely on the rest of the university to fund the athletic department. Like, Nebraska has long been able to stand on that and kind of stick out its chest and say, we don't use money from the general fund. We're self-supporting athletic department. It's amazing how many people in, I think, this college sports world,
my God,
Nebraska ethosphere still don't understand that and think that, oh, taxpayer money is going to pay revenue sharing or somehow.
Every time Nebraska builds a new building or something like that, and there's some fancy, I'm talking about Nebraska athletics. Every time they build a new building and there's something crazy in there. I remember when they did the like the iPads and the lockers at the Hendricks basketball facility, and you go on like Facebook or some crap like that, and people are like, what the heck? And we're out here paying teachers this, and we can't have, technology for students and stuff like that. Like, those are not related. Nebraska athletics self-sustains and funds itself, and they give back actually to the university.
Right. Well,
I don't know if that'll be the case
continue
anymore.
to do that.
Right. I don't know if that'll be the case anymore, but different things. Good.
Yeah, some of that is probably intentional misinformation that's spread when Nebraska it rolls out a big project, and which is a completely different story for probably a different podcast. But in what's going on here, like, other schools, and we're not talking about like Louisiana Monroe, like Ohio State, Indiana. There are other schools within the Big Ten, just about everybody, that are running at a big deficit. And in order to meet this need, are going to have to either come up with new sources of revenue. And you see Tennessee, for instance, like raising tickets on everything. They have to just straight borrow from the university, from the foundation, or wherever it can be arranged. And Nebraska did some of that in building the football facility, but like, that is not the norm, and that is not what Nebraska is going to do with revenue sharing.
And there's no doubt that it at some point it's going to hit fans, right? Like, it's going to hit them, right? Nebraska's working on a new layout and basically, for all intents and purposes, a new Memorial Stadium. They're revamping the entire thing. Like, there's going to be some stuff that gets down, and they'll have to pay for it, and Nebraska will need the money to pay for it, and they're going to be asking fans. So, like, Nebraska is not immune to any of these things.
Absolutely,
and like you said, they still have to raise the money. But like, I think it goes to his point, Nebraska's preparation and organization on this, whether it be from Rhule or 1890 or Troy Dannen or Trev Alberts, laying the seeds a long time ago. I remember when he said out loud, it's like, hey, we're going to need to set aside $20 million. Like, this is coming.
Yeah.
I feel like Nebraska's preparation for this has been maybe far out ahead of its peers.
And just about everybody. I don't know, where you can find another school that is in the same spot as Nebraska. I'm not convinced that Nebraska is the only one out there in all of the Power Four that is in this good of shape to go into rev share. And maybe some schools don't see it as a bad position. Like, they'll just run a deficit. They'll borrow from the university. The university understands the importance of football or college athletics to their overall mission, and they'll just continue to help fund it. That's a possibility, but at some point, that's probably going to catch up to you. At some point, it's better not to have a big deficit like that. And Nebraska, I think Matt Rhule came into into Saturday when he answered this question, and he knew he was going to give some of that answer. Like he was going to find a way to say that there are other schools out there that can float a big number now and disappoint a kid later. Like that sounded like something that he had written out, at least in his head, a few days before, and come up with as like a way to strategically plant the seed. If you're a player out there and you catch wind of this and you catch this story, hey, you might go to school X, Y, or Z and get told that your share of the 14 million, or it'd be 15 million, 16 million when you get later in your career, is going to be X percent. Or, hey, if you can become an all conference player, you're guaranteed 7 figures. That may not happen. They may make those promises and then not be able to answer them years down the road. Nebraska is saying that it absolutely can, because it doesn't have to go places outside of the athletic department to find that cash.
We could touch more on this when we come back, including how can Nebraska continue to spin it into a positive for them, and how can it work to their advantage going forward. We could talk some Nebraska volleyball. Mitch has got a big story coming out soon. Nebraska basketball in action tonight in the Pacific Northwest. Plenty to come here on the Locked On Nebraska podcast.
All right, something else big that's happening this week is the Super Bowl. Maybe you've heard. And if you want to go, it's a little bit late, but maybe you're in the South. Maybe you're listening to us and you're thinking, I want to check and see if there's some tickets that came up at the last minute. It could be a long shot, but the way to do it is to go with Game Time. And the energy and the excitement and the connections with fans that you'll find there or anywhere that's a live event is unmatched. There's nothing like it. Game Time can help you elevate that opportunity to get in the game and see all of the events you want inside the arena, inside the stadium. Check out the new feature that Game Time's got. It's called Game Time Picks. You can get tickets with ease to the events that you choose. What Game Time Picks does is it filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of offers. I've used Game Time for events here around Omaha when I've been on the road. Give it a shot. Browsing through the deals is a breeze. I love that it lets me see the seat views before I buy. The app shows that total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. They've got the on-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantees. It just provides complete peace of mind. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the Game Time app today. Game Time, last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to this Wednesday. Is it Wednesday? Wednesday edition of the Locked On Nebraska podcast. I'm Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer, 1620 The Zone, is with me. We were talking about revenue sharing, Connor, before the break, and just how much of an advantage Nebraska has in that it is a rich athletic department, a self-sustaining athletic department. And of course, a lot of that comes from the Big Ten TV revenue. So there's 17 other schools out there that are getting the same, or are working toward, in the case of some of the new entries, working toward getting the same revenue, piece of the pie that Nebraska gets from Fox and its media partners. That's certainly a huge part of it. But for whatever reason, because of the fan support that Nebraska has, because of the way that it has historically sold tickets, because of the way that the people in Husker Nation support this athletic department, they're in a better position than most within the Big Ten. How do we put this into real terms where, okay, we can see Nebraska using this to its advantage beyond just being able to tell recruits that if you come here and we say we're going to pay you something, you can rest assured, you can know you're going to get it.
Well, I think it goes to what Rhule said. That's a really big part of it, to say, hey, you could go up to them and say, hey, look, other people they're lying to you, or it's not going to be exactly what it looks like because they don't have that part of their game figured out yet. We do. Now, Nebraska has a structure as well. I've talked a lot we've talked a lot, Mitch, too, over the last couple of years, just about Nebraska's organization, right? Like it shows itself in recruiting. It shows itself in, NIL when you're trying to court a player and stuff like that at a transfer portal. And I think it really shows itself here too. So they could use that and say, hey, look, man, this is what it is, and this is what it'll be like when you're here. If this is the biggest thing to you, like if the money is the thing that matters. Nebraska obviously has to win some football games, and they have to get up with their peers in that regard. But like when they get there, the other stuff should theoretically be kind of taken care of.
This is something where Troy Dannen, and I don't want to just be the cheerleader here, but where Troy Dannen really does deserve a lot of credit. You think back, it's been almost a year since Trev Alberts left Nebraska for Texas A&M, and consider the emotions and the shock and just like the disappointment that Nebraska fans and Nebraska people had when he left. Like, you're leaving us out here in the cold at this time in college football and in college sports in general, where everything's changing and there are new rules and new ways of doing things. And like, Trev had helped Nebraska ramp up to the point where it was in a good position to enter that era. But to leave like before a lot of it started, man, it felt like in that moment that it was a really big setback. And Dannen has come in, and Nebraska, to its credit, the administration at Nebraska went out and found a seasoned athletic director, somebody who had done it at the Group of 5 level at Tulane and then had been at Washington for a short time. But Troy was just already very respected within the college sports community. And he has been able to, I think, refocus Nebraska in a way that probably wouldn't have happened. Like, the reality is, like, Nebraska's ability to be streamlined with its collective with 1890 is dramatically different under Troy Dannen's leadership than what it was under Trev Alberts' leadership. And Troy came in and right away started to talk about that $20 million line item on the budget. I think that was, I know that was in Trev Alberts' mind, but there were some forces, there was some friction between Trev and some other parts of the leadership that were making it maybe more difficult, like to clear the air in that moment. It maybe, looking back on it, was like the best thing that could have happened to Nebraska, as strange as that is to say.
Like, I was just going to say that, like, it almost timing wise worked out perfectly, which is, I would not have said a year ago. But, I think Trev, the position he put Nebraska in from a financial perspective was really, really important. I mean, he got them to a place, and then Dannen got them to a place that Trev might not have been able to get them to. Absolutely. I think Trev was pretty tight around the edges and definitely got Nebraska to a good spot. But like you said, Dannen coming in with this kind of, he's new, it's fresh a little bit. When a guy like Trev has been around for such a long time, like, there's just all these relationships and different pieces of baggage that you kind of have to deal with. And so Nebraska, with Dannen, and that fresh kind of new relationship, and now as college athletics is like officially moving into this next thing, they could push that forward. Like, I think you could make the case that it worked out actually pretty well for everybody.
So one thing that Troy Dannen did, of course, over the last couple of weeks here, is he navigated and managed this coaching transition in the volleyball program from John Cook to Dani Busboom Kelly. And we talked about this last week, how it was essential. It was extremely important to Dannen when he found out on Monday night that Cook was absolutely committed to stepping down, that he'd made the final decision. And Dannen had already at that point talked to Dani Busboom Kelly and knew that she was the coach that he wanted. But then they had 36 hours basically to get everything lined up and keep it quiet. Because it was of the most importance for Dannen and Kristen Brown, who is Nebraska's deputy athletic director and senior women administrator, the sport administrator for volleyball, to make sure that the players on the Nebraska roster and the players on the Louisville roster, who were losing their coach too, did not find out about this from social media or from a traditional media leak. And it's hard. It's hard in a situation like this. This is maybe the most high-profile coaching change in the history of college volleyball, which is a big deal in the state of Nebraska. It's hard to keep that quiet, but to their credit, they did. And I think a lot of that is because of the respect that people have, like the people who did know within the athletic department. the respect that they have for Cook, and nobody was going to run to a message board or social media and get this out there. So I have a story out today. It's out this morning on The Athletic about the behind the scenes events that allowed this to go down smoothly. And it was really interesting to report. We heard a lot of this on the press conference last Thursday with Dannen and Cook about the domino effect of Dani playing at Nebraska and then coaching at Nebraska and going to Louisville and how she ended up coming back. But the part that's new is about some of the emotions that went into this too. And I wanted to kind of dive into what happened between Cook and Harper Murray, because it's a huge storyline. And I hope that the emotion comes through in the article from my conversation with Sarah Murray, Harper's mom, who got a call from John last Tuesday night. So Monday night, he told Dannen. Tuesday night last week, he called Sarah Murray. Wednesday, late in the day, the press release came out. The announcement came out on both coaches. Thursday was the press conference in the morning. And, John, well, just read the article. John had some important things to talk about with Sarah about Harper. And Sarah was emotional in that conversation with John. And she was emotional in talking to me last Friday about, in recounting it. It was hard to listen to her, I'll say, and not get kind of caught up in the emotion myself. Like, I have an 18-year-old daughter. Like, there's an easy way to relate there. So go check out that story.
Well, it's really, that is probably the most delicate piece in a very, very delicate situation. And not because you don't want her to hear her wrong and she'll transfer or something like that. But,
No.
but because she has gone through a lot over her life, talking about Harper Murray. And so you have to make sure it kind of hits her ears the right way and she hears it from the right people. Really, really delicate. And then the whole state secret part of it, fascinating, because I don't know, Mitch, we've both lived here forever. You can't keep a secret. It's you can't.
No, Nebraska still hasn't announced the Mike Eckler hire, which is a much less significant deal than John Cook retiring. And it's not even official, but everyone knows. And it leaked like things do.
Yeah. So it's impressive. It's really impressive how they were able to pull that off. I would definitely encourage people to read Mitch's story on The Athletic, which is out right now.
What do we think? Final thought on this topic. So tomorrow, Thursday, they're going to hold this event at the Devaney Center, and we saw Dani and her husband Lane Kelly, who was a Nebraska football player. He was a long snapper back in the day. Maybe he can help Nebraska's special teams issues. We don't know. You don't know what we're getting. Lane Kelly coming back. This could be big. We're going to connect these two. Connect with Kelly and Mike Eckler on text someday, but. We saw pictures of them with their son getting off the private jet last night in Lincoln Tuesday night. Where else does that happen? Nowhere other than Nebraska for that to make a splash.
And the celebration that they're going to have tomorrow.
What's that going to be like?
Like a parade?
I don't know what to expect. I don't know if there's going to be 1,000 people there or 8,000 people there. It's 2:00 in the afternoon on a Thursday. What in February? What's that going to be like?
Oh, there will be people. There will be people, Mitch. And it'll be, I would imagine that the Nebraska volleyball fans drop absolutely everything to show up to that thing and welcome Dani Busboom Kelly home.
Yeah, I'll be there. I want to check it out. I don't have any more stories planned on volleyball. I've written the one on Dani that I did last week. I wrote the story about the transition that's out today. But I think it's a big moment in Nebraska sports to see how this goes down, so I wouldn't miss it. All right, when we come back, Nebraska basketball is in action on the court tonight in Seattle. We will discuss that and anything else that's left on the docket related to football this week. That's coming up.
All right, welcome back. Connor Hamper, Mitch Sherman with you, rounding out a Wednesday edition here of the Locked on Nebraska podcast. Nebraska basketball winners of their last two, both against ranked teams, Illinois and Oregon. They stay out in the Pacific Northwest and they make their maiden voyage out to Seattle to play one of, if not the worst teams in the Big Ten, Washington, on the road. Washington is a place where Maryland has lost already this year. That is one of the top teams in the Big Ten. That was several weeks ago. Washington has, after that, lost 6 games in a row themselves, coming off of a win on Saturday against Minnesota. By the way, before we get to Nebraska's piece of this, I was interested. I had to learn a little bit about Washington last night.
Good. I'm glad you did.
So, familiar faces. Are you ready to see Wilhelm Breidenbach again?
Oh. Well, Braxton Mia from Nebraska played at Washington last year.
That's right. That's right. And there's one more. So Christian King he's sort of a reserve bench player, hasn't played the last few games for Washington. He's a freshman. That is Rich King's son. He plays for Washington, and has played in I think 14 games this year.
Does he have his dad's height? Is he a 7-footer?
He is 6'8".
Oh, so
not quite, but
Rich King.
Yeah.
Omaha Burke grad there.
That's right.
So be proud of that. That's interesting. There's a Nebraska connection on every team in the Big Ten, isn't there?
It feels like
Wilbur Zone, Dana Altman. We heard all about that in the broadcast the other night. You had St. Thomas not long ago coming into PBA with USC to reclaim his territory. That's his gym.
Tanji's at Wisconsin.
John Tanji.
Fiddler's at Michigan State. There's a lot of them.
Interesting. So what's at stake? What's at stake tonight for Nebraska basketball? You got a chance. You just won a couple of games that people weren't expecting you to win. The Illinois game was maybe would have been a toss-up if Nebraska hadn't lost 6 in a row. I don't think it was a toss-up on that skid. Illinois was expected to win. So Nebraska wins a couple games it's not expected to win. Now this is one where it's hard to say on the road in the Big Ten with a team that's 4-7 in the league that you expect Nebraska to win. But I kind of expect Nebraska to win going in there tonight. 9:30 tip, by the way, Central Time. So get a nap today.
Oh yeah, that is deep into the night. I think you should expect Nebraska to win. Now it's one of those things where if you lose, it doesn't kill you if you lose just because it's a road game, but it's an opportunity for Nebraska. You know what's weird about this entire thing? They lost 6 games in a row, and it's like, oh my God, they're dead. And then they've won these last 2, and it feels like not only are they kind of, staring dead in the eye of being right squarely on the bubble again. It almost feels like they kind of have some margin for error too. Like they have a couple big home games left that can move the meter for them against Ohio State and Maryland. That's coming up after this one, but. And so those are opportunities to move some things a little bit, and their road games aren't particularly challenging. You could expect that Nebraska wins, 1 or 2 out of their remaining 3 home games road games after tonight. So they don't have a lot of margin for error, obviously, but it's funny how fast ththings can change with
life in the Big Ten. This is a conference that I think gives you some wiggle room. It allows you to have, maybe not for every year for every team, a 6-game losing streak in the middle. But what Nebraska has done on the road and winning at Creighton, which is looking like a better win every week.
Getting better, yeah.
And now this Oregon win. I mean, Oregon's an NCAA tournament team. Oregon is not playing its best basketball right now, and was looking great in November and December. Welcome to the Big Ten, Oregon, but didn't happen in football. They didn't get that welcome until the CFP, but they're getting it in basketball here right in the middle of the season because of those wins. Yeah,
there's another one too, like that the UCLA win is starting to look a little bit better, and the St. Mary's loss back in South Dakota. I'm telling you, St. Mary's might. They're going to actually do the thing this year. It looks like, and they beat Gonzaga the other night. They're going to, I think, win the WCC.
Gonzaga's not great this year, right?
Yeah, they're just a step down from what they usually are. So you'll look at that and you'll say neutral court, lost by 3, came down to the last possession. Like if you're really trying to piece it through at the end of the selection process, that could be a point in Nebraska's favor too. That's
such a strange year. It's such a strange year, and we're not even to the middle of February to say that Nebraska's had a 6-game losing streak and it's beaten 4 ranked opponents, which 4 ranked opponents. That's the first. I heard on the broadcast the other night, first time since 98, 99. Is that right?
I think it's only happened 2 or 3 other times in school history, and they were all in the 90s when Nebraska basketball was rolling a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe they can do something this year that they didn't do in the 90s, and that would be get to the NCAA tournament and win a game, which
still on the table.
Can hardly imagine if it does get to that. But we'll be watching an interesting night of basketball in the state. You've got Creighton on TV at 7:30 at Providence, and then Nebraska coming up right after that at Washington at 9:30. So we may be a little groggy tomorrow morning on the Thursday morning on the pod. By the way, get your mailbag questions into us. You want to talk about basketball? You want to ask us about this volleyball transition? Whatever you thought about Matt Rhule's comments on Saturday, send us those questions. We will answer them Friday in a mailbag show, lockedonneb@gmail.com. You can also hit us up on Twitter. Anything else, Connor, that you feel is compelling enough to discuss here in about Nebraska football? There's really nothing going on with Nebraska football this week. You have the Super Bowl, of course, and the storylines. Are you compelled by either Terry Braden, the Chiefs D-line coach, who will report for work at Nebraska after, or Cam Jurgens, the Eagles center?
Not necessarily. I mean, we could definitely use this as an episode like tomorrow or something like that. But like, I've started to think more now that we're nearing the end of the bulk of the off season, the meat of the off season, and turning our attention toward spring ball and stuff like that. Like, I'm starting to think more big picture about what the transformation that Nebraska has undergone here with all their new coordinators and their 16 plus transfers, several of which who are going to be starters at this point. Like, it is a big thing to do that Nebraska just did kind of on the fly, on the run. And I feel like undoubtedly with what they did, they're in a better position than they were at the start of last year. Now, I don't know if they're going to have a better record, but it feels like they're in a better position to me.
Should we do an episode and rank the transfers most likely to start at Nebraska in 2025?
You could do that, or we could do like biggest offseason additions, or biggest additions over the last year period, like coaching staff plus whatever.
I like that. Yeah. I like that. So over the last year, so then you get to include like Jamar Mosey in that group, even though he wasn't added to the coaching staff after the season. Those sound like two different episodes, or maybe we roll it into one. But all right, we'll just keep brainstorming off air. And in this episode here, thank you for making the Locked On Nebraska podcast your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Craig is there. He's going to put the Big Ten first. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.